Welcome to Volunteer Friendly episode 11, Fighting Comparison. Hey everybody, this is Will Doggett. So glad you have joined me for the Volunteer Friendly show. This is a show from studio to stage, and it's all about thought-provoking questions, statements that leave you contemplating by yourself and then discussing with your team. And if you are a worship leader, production person, someone involved in making Sundays happen at churches, then this show is for you. And every week I leave you with 3 processing questions as we discuss a topic. Hopefully leave you with more questions than answers and a little bit of tension as we discuss things that make us go, man, we should start doing this, stop doing this. Why did we do this in the first place? So let's get to today's episode. This is kind of a continuation of last week's episode where we're on this theme of fighting, things to fight. And today we're talking about fighting comparison. This is something that I see worship leaders, I think, do more than production people. Although as church production is becoming more prominent, as more people engage in seeing what other churches are doing, I see this growing in production as well too. But I definitely have seen this, I think, for years, be a bigger struggle for worship leaders than it is for production folks. But we're going to talk about both of those. This idea of comparison is basically looking at what we have versus what someone else has and comparing it, right? Either a skill set or gear or platform or whatever it is. We look at what they have and go, man, why don't I have that? Or we measure up what we're doing to what someone else is doing, as opposed to going and just staying in our moment and saying, how truthful, how close are we being to what we feel like God has called us to do? Instead of that, we go, let's look at that famous church down the road. Let's look at that famous church across the world that we watch on the internet, and how good are we to what they're doing? We watch Sunday services afterwards. We review them. Maybe we review them with our team and we go, it was good, but it's not insert famous church name here. Good. Right. It's super easy for us to compare ourselves to them. And I think one of the important things to remember, I always think back to the story that John Acuff told. And when he worked at Ramsey Solutions and with Dave Ramsey, he told the story of watching Dave Ramsey on the air and just going, man, I feel so inadequate. Like, I'm about to go do this thing and I feel so inadequate. And he said the person next to him, who I think was a producer for Dave's show, said, yeah, but listen, you're comparing your middle to his end. Like, this is something he spent years and years and years and years perfecting and working on, and you're just starting. So of course you're not going to be as good as he is, right? I think sometimes we so often focus on God-given talents and abilities, right? But we don't focus on the fact that you look at that famous church down the road, you look at that particular person that you're trying to compare yourself to, and you don't, one, know the struggles that person's facing, but 2, you don't know the hours and hours and work that person put into to getting where they are, right? And maybe there's some nefarious things they did to get there, or that's easy for you to think that's what happened. But more often than not, it's just hard work. They've done it longer, they've worked really hard, and that's why they're in that particular place. But I think the comparison thing a lot of times comes down to insecurities that we have, right? We're trying to measure what we're doing, measure ourselves to someone else, as opposed to going, how faithfully are we being, how honest and how close are we being to what God has called us and our particular community and our particular church to do. As opposed to focusing on that, we're looking at this external thing. And a lot of that is driven, I think, from these insecurities we have. We're trying to make up for something because we feel inadequate. Comparison is us looking for a way to measure up, right? And we're trying to go, okay, we got this measure of the famous worship leader, and I want to sing just as good as she does. I want to write songs just as good as he does, right? And if we continually are falling short and we're continually frustrated, and I think sometimes that gives us an excuse to not do the work. Because we look and go, we'll never be as good as blank. Well, our church service will never be as great as this church's service. So because of that, what's even the point of trying? It gives us kind of a cop-out, a way out. I think the other thing, so we got to remind ourselves in those moments, God doesn't make crap, right? He has specifically called us to be in the specific place at the specific moment. He's put a specific calling on this community of people, called us to reach our community a specific way, to do things a specific way. And who cares if it doesn't measure up with the famous church down the road? We're not called to do that. We're not called to copy that person. I always used to say that, people would always say, in this room is maybe the next Billy Graham. And I go, no, in this room isn't the next Billy Graham. I hope not, but I hope it's the next Will Doggett. which would be me. Insert you. You're going, whatever your name is, I hope I'm the next blank, because God has created you a unique way with unique talents, unique abilities. And if you do the work, then you're going to get to where God wants you to be, doing the things he wants you to do. But if you're constantly comparing yourself to this person, trying to be that person, what's the point? It's not helpful. It's not good. The other thing that I think is super dangerous with this comparison thing is it leads us away from community, because we turn inward and we start to focus on, again, the inadequacies we feel, the things we don't have. We don't want to go to this conference with that famous worship leader because we're just going to walk away. We don't have this. We don't have that. Those guys are so wrong, blah, 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 blah. And it takes us away from community. So I think one of the things that really helps with this comparison thing is really stepping into community. Find a group of worship leaders in your area. Find a group of production people in your area that you can go to lunch with, that you can talk about, and ask them, like, what things are you guys struggling with? What do you feel like you're doing really well? And share that with them. And what you're going to see, I think, is a lot of the people that you look on and go, man, I love what they're doing. You don't know at what cost that is happening. You don't know, that person may be burnt out trying to make that happen. And you go, now to think of it, I'd rather like have what we have and not be burnt out than be burnt out and have what they have. Or you may realize, oh man, there's some things we're doing here in our environment and in our community that are going really well that this person could learn from me. And getting in that community aspect, we just learned that, I mean, that's how we can learn from each other. There's no person that, no matter how little experience they have, we can always learn from that person. No matter how much experience we have, we can always learn from that person. And so when we're dealing with and we're fighting with comparison, we have this tendency to isolate. We have this tendency to stay just us, focus just on our needs, on the things that we're feeling, as opposed to exposing ourselves to community and being in community. So I think it's super important for us to find that community aspect. Okay. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to do what we do every single episode here, where I throw out 3 kind of thought-provoking questions for you to contemplate on your own, then discuss with your team. And if you want a downloadable PDF where you can have these questions, print, share with your team, you can do that freely after you download it. Then head to volunteerfriendly.com, look for episode 11. That's the episode we're on today. And you can print out these questions. Okay, let's go through these together. Number 1. In what areas are we comparing ourselves to others? Now this takes a lot of vulnerability. It takes a lot of, you got to do this processing on your own before you share this with your team. But number 1, in what areas are we comparing ourselves to others? This could be other worship leaders, other production people, other churches down the road, famous churches that we see on the internet across the world, whatever it is. Number 1, in what areas are we comparing ourselves to others? Number 2, this is going to be, number 1 was kind of difficult to answer. Number 2 is going to be close to impossible to answer, but I think it's worth the fight to get there. And this is maybe something you don't share with your team. And maybe this is something you don't, you process alone. You don't necessarily discuss together, but I hope you can answer. I just think it's going to be super beneficial. Number 2, what insecurities do we feel that we are trying to hide? What insecurities do we feel that we are trying to hide? Answer this for yourself. What are things that you feel insecure about that you're trying to hide by either going and trying to compare yourself to others to distract from this thing you're doing, to measure up, to either go, I do it way better than this guy, and that's an attempt to hide this thing, or to go, I feel insecure about my ability to songwrite. I'll never be as good of a songwriter as this person, so I'm just going to stop. And what areas what insecurities do you feel that you're trying to hide? And number 3, finally, what groups and people can we hang out with that can help shape us and grow us? Because again, the cure to comparison is community. The cure to moving from this inward focused and comparing yourself to either make yourself feel better because you do it better than this person, or give yourself an excuse to not pursue a challenge because you're never going to be as good as that person, is to be in community. So number 3, what groups or people can we hang out with that can help shape us and grow us? Again, as a reminder, if you want to download those questions, those processing questions to contemplate on your own or to discuss with your team, then head to volunteerfriendly.com. and type in episode 11. You can find episode 11 there. Download the free PDF and process those questions. Again, contemplate them on your own and then process and discuss them with your team. Thanks for joining me so much for this week's episode. I hope this is beneficial for you. I hope you leave with more questions than answers. I hope you feel a little bit of tension and frustration, and you do the time and the work to really process these questions and think through them. I'll see you next week, next Thursday, 10 a.m. Central. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Take care. Bye.